Today is the yahrzeit of Moshe Rabbeinu. And it's also the yahrzeit of a wonderful Rebbe whose name was Reb Aizik'l Kaliver, and he lived in Hungary. And first I want to say something about Moshe Rabbeinu, because we wouldn't be doing what we are doing here had it not been for who he was and what he did. Most people see Moshe Rabbeinu almost as if he were to have been a yeshiva bocher, and then studied and become a great goen and a tzaddik, and he studied in some kind of a yeshiva. But if we take the story as we find it in the Chumash seriously, and we should, then he got the best education that anyone could get in Egypt in his day. As a princeling in Pharaoh's house, he went to the Harvard and Princeton and Yale that was around at that time. And when we see the movie Moses and Ten Commandments, we have the same kind of situation that he and the one who becomes the Pharaoh is they're really peers. And so you have a sense of that part of Moshe Rabbeinu. But then there's something that happens to him when he sees the suffering of his family, of his people. And I tell you, there's something that happens to every Jew, no matter how assimilated he is, when he has a sense that someone is anti-Semitic, something gets aroused in him, as it was with Theodor Herzl, because he had gone to cover the Dreyfus trial in Paris for the Neue Freie Presse, which in Europe in those days was like the New York Times. Everything worth to read, all the news. And so he went there as a reporter. As he walks through the street, somebody calls him Sal Shvif, dirty Jew. And when you start thinking about the result of that, Zionism was aroused in him because of that feeling that he has. So I think Moshe Rabbeinu must have felt something from the moment on he was identified by the Egyptians as being a Jew. Something happens to him that's very powerful. But he can't stay in Egypt because he is a wanted man. So where does he go? He goes into the desert. If we follow the genealogy and the history of Moses, he spent 40 years that we don't know where. And then the last 20 years, from 60 to 80, he was with the shaman of the desert, Yisro. We call him the Kohen of Midian, the priest of Midian. But you got to remember, what does it mean to be the priest for the wandering Bedouins? They're sort of like both the prophet, the healer, everything. So he's apprenticing with him too. And then comes the burning bush, and an encounter with God, and so on and so forth. So, to get into the mind of Moshe Rabbeinu and what it must have been like for him is really, really amazing. So when you read Psalm 91, where Moses says, "From generation to generation you have been our God, before the mountains were created," and so on. You see him at this point. And at the end of his life, he knows the people with whom he is to work. And I sort of feel like it's almost like Obama. He has tried to lead us out of the dark, but in the meantime, there are always some people like the Korachs and other people who are in his way and don't allow him to do this. So I just want to say, Moshe Rabbeinu, I thank you for having lived. I thank you for having been the conduit of Torah for us. And that whole possibility that a person should be face to face with God, that there should be the clearest of all possible revelations coming through him as we believe in our credo. That's a remarkable thing to say. At the same time, Moshe Rabbeinu is in heaven about to receive the Torah when he hears something of Torah that he can't understand. And he asks God, what's going on here? And he says, have a little patience. Rabbi Akiva is holding forth. And someone asked Rabbi Akiva, where did you get it from? He says, it's Halacha Moshe Sinai. I got it all the way from Moses. Okay? And then he feels better. And I have a feeling that, dear Moshe Rabbeinu, if you wonder what we are doing here, we got it all from you. And then I want to go to the Kaliver Rebbe, who, as the story goes, was a goose herd for his, that's how he made the few cents for a living. They raised geese a lot in Hungary. They were a staple of food. And along comes a tzaddik, one of the hidden tzaddikim by the name of Reb Zusha, and he talks to that child, and he sees this child has a deep light, a great light burning in him. So he goes to the mother and says to the mother, what's the use of him being just a goose herd? Let me take him and I'll bring him to a good place, a yeshiva, and I know that you're a poor widow and you need a few cents that this brings in. Here's some money. And she gives him permission to take the son, and he takes him to Reb Shmelke of Nikolsburg, and he becomes a great tzaddik. And what I especially like about him was that he spoke Hungarian. Now, what do I mean by that? That he felt that it was necessary to do things in the vernacular. So he conducted a whole Seder in Hungarian, which upset some of the people. The story goes that he went by a gypsy who heard him play in a tavern and sing, and he says, will you sell me the song? The gypsy thought it was a silly thing to ask to sell a song. Today with what is it, with what's the music thing?
iTunes.
Huh? iTunes, yeah. It's not we don't ask this question anymore about paying for a song, but he said, I'll pay you for the song. And he taught him the song. The story goes, the gypsy forgot it afterwards, but he gave him the money. And the song went something like this. I know one stanza in Hungarian. Solo kokoshma, moid medvirat mar, silder döben, shik mezöben, sheitalet madja. Silder döben, shik mezöben, sheitalet madja. The song says, the cock is crowing in the morning, and I'm becoming aware how alone I am. And so there's this bird, and I say, bird, will you do me a favor? When you fly across the forest and you meet my beloved, tell her, when the winter is over, I'll marry up with her. That's the song. So along comes the Kaliver, and it says, bird, bird, where are you flying? South is getting cold, flying to Yerushalayim. He says, would you do me a favor? When you get to the Kotel, tell the Shechina, when the Golus will be over, the exile will be over, I'll come right away. And then in Yiddish, the last stanza goes, Wenn Shevetozan, when will this be? Wenn Shevetozan, Az Yibone HaMikdosh, Irtzi Yoin Temale, Demolt Vetozan. When the temple will be rebuilt and Zion will be filled with people, then it will be. So I'm asking also you, Reb Aizik'l Kaliver, who understands why it's necessary to teach in the vernacular, to daven in the vernacular, that you should help us out today. I want to talk about basics preparation, because we are coming into a landing as far as this series is concerned, and what needs to be said yet. There's sometimes I'll repeat myself and can't help that, because it is always necessary to become aware before you start davening, to be able to say, that's what I'm going to do. I'm about to go and daven. And if you look in the old Sidurim, not so old Sidurim, it says, Hineni muchan umezuman. I'm ready, and I feel myself invited to do this thing. And so I'm stepping up to do that. And why am I doing this? Well, I want to tell you my motivation, besides all the other motivations that I might have. Like, I couldn't possibly eat breakfast before I daven. Okay? So that's another motivation. But that's not the main motivation. Main motivation is l'shem yichud kutsheb'richu shchinte. I want to bring about the union of God Transcendent with God Immanent. Right here and now. And that's the reason why I'm about to daven. Another thing to be added to that is that I ask myself, is there between me and anyone else anything that shouldn't be? Am I really connected to all of Israel? Do I love every one of Israel like myself? And by this, as we read it, as God restless, but the real situation is, am I plugged in to all sentient beings when I'm davening? Because the likelihood is that my particular davening, no matter how good it will be, is just one little tile in the mosaic of humanity praying to God. And if I understand that clearly, then I know that I shouldn't think that I can do it solo. So that's when we say, B'Shem Kol Yisrael, Hineni Muchan Zuman, I want to be included with everybody else. I remove any hatred from my heart from anybody. I love them all. And on that basis, Hineni Muchan Zuman, here I'm ready. Remember the story I told you about how my Rebbe got ready to daven and his daughter held the mirror in front of him to see that the tefillin are in the right place. And he looked and said, Otazoi, das bidecha davena. Now I'm ready to daven, you know, I'm in my space. So that means that we have to check what might be obstructing our way beforehand and see what we can do to remove it. Here is a very practical suggestion. Show me a person today who in Davvenen doesn't have some distracting thoughts about important things that they have to do. Okay? In the middle of Davvenen, I'll remember, oh, I got to call this person, they're sitting shiva, or I got to do this, I got to do that. Another story like this about a man, Reb Yitzhak, after Mincha, walks over to a couple of people and shakes their hand and says, Shalom Aleichem. So he says, what are you giving a Shalom Aleichem? We didn't just travel. We're not coming from... Oh, he says, yes. When you were daven Shemon Esrei, you were in Odessa. Okay? So that's really clear. So, but I don't want to go and deal with that. You can't wrestle with those thoughts. If I say I don't want to think about it now, it'll say, that's what you always say, and you never remember. So on a weekday, I have a little pad and paper next to me. And you should see how many important things I remember in the middle of the davening, so that by the time I finish davening, I have a nice to-do list for today. But I didn't let it distract me for longer than to mark it down. And that's an important part. Now, since a lot of the stuff in Davvenen has to do with attunement, the only instrument in the whole orchestra that's the hardest to tune is the oboe. All the others he can dreh a little bit ahin and aher. So when it gets to the orchestra tuning up, the oboe plays the A, the violins take over, and everybody tunes into that. Having tuned in, then they will be able to play together in harmony. The question is, if I just come from having been on the computer and taking care of some business, that mind is not the best mind to bring to Davvenen. So I have to retune myself just the same way as I would have to retune an instrument. And so I retune myself. What's the best way to do that? There is something that they call Lectio Divina among our farther cousins, the monks, the Christian monks. They take a sacred text, like we study Torah, and read that inspirational text prior to their prayer. And that's why, for instance, when I was in the yeshiva, we would study Chassidus for quite a while before Davvenen, and then meditate on it. In other words, bring it to ourselves and saying, now my aperture will be open to these and these vibrations, which are in the Davvenen field and not in the business field or in the traffic field. So that's really important. So I read a paragraph or two of something that inspires me, and of course that does it right away, you know. It attunes me the same way as I look at something and my eyes accommodate themselves to, is it closer or nearer? In the same way I read something of that stuff, and there's an accommodation of my awareness to that part. It's also important to make a list of items you want to bring into prayer, the people you want to pray for. I want to spend some time on that. There are some people who have the sense of, especially when we talk about those who are into spirituality, that now they're doing their practice. I'm making fun of that, because that means that it's all about them. It never stops being about them. When, on the other hand, I'm about to daven, if I want to really have a sense that I'm not speaking to the wall, I need to bring from time to time something to God that I need. As we talked about, that there is a scriptural commandment to daven, which doesn't go with the siddur, just goes with the heart. And then the words that we are reciting that are as a rabbinic commandment. But if I don't have that moment when I can say, dear God, today I need a little bit more energy. I'm going to be doing that taping, and I would like to be clear, and I want to be an instrument in your hand that it may happen. I also have some concerns from one of my sons, so please, Reb Michel, you're also a father, take care of that. Do you see what I'm saying? When I can get into a place, and that's for real for me, then when I say Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitromam, V'yitnaseh, makes a difference, because I have already said that this is for real for me. So make a list of all the things you want to pray for. Before PDAs, I used to have a little thing here with 3x5 cards, and I had all the rubrics of the Shemoneh Esrei written on there. And it would begin with awareness, tshuva, forgiveness, energy and help, healing, and so on and so forth. And if during the day it would occur to me that that's something I need to do, so I would take that out and make a little mark. So when I started to daven, especially the Shemoneh Esrei, where you're making, I would be able to say, and heal those people, and especially heal so-and-so at this point. Okay? And that was an important thing. Right now, I would like to see someone by the name of Peretz, the son of Abraham, is a Ger Tzedek, that he should be able to have all the resources for the good things he wants to do. Say Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so that's the thing that I would put on my little note. And if you can create something for yourself to take up with God on your PDA, you'll see how wonderful that is, because it becomes real. When I began today, I was doing the yahrzeit of Moshe Rabbeinu and of Reb Aizik'l Kaliver. And there is a friend of mine whose son Nebuch was killed in an automobile accident. And just today they got up from Shiva. So what is my prayer? First of all, for the consolation for the family, because it's a hard thing to see. But even more so, for that soul to find her way easily around, to be able to reach out to those beings who are there to help, to give an orientation and to help that person out. And I can think of several other people like Shalva Rochel, who I'm thinking of, who passed on recently, so that they too are in my prayer at that point. So sometimes he can say Kaddish, sometimes he can't say Kaddish. But what's more important is to send a care package up there. And what's a care package? When you say Keil Molarachvim, Shochen Meromim, Hamtse Menucha Nachon, Tachas Kanfe Ashchina, God full of mercy, grant perfect repose and rest to the soul of so-and-so. Then it says, Bavur Shanachnu Nodvim Tzedakah Ba'daskos Nishmoso, because we are going to give some tzedakah in order to remember the soul. Now, what does that mean? There is, according to our teaching, no universe, no realm in the whole shebang where you can do something as much as you can do in this world of Asiya. That's the doing world. So when you come to the other world, you have the reward of what you have done here, but you can't add anything. So whenever we study Torah and send the merit up to that person who taught us, or we give tzedakah and send the merit up, we increase for them the merit there. That's why I call it sending a care package, you know. It's like, if you will, how do I launder money? I turn it into tzedakah, and then I can collect it up there. I'm just using this as a mashal, okay. When you have people whom you love, and you have pictures in an album, and you show the pictures to someone, and the other person looks at those with some kind of interest and good feeling for you. Oh, how wonderful. Yeah, these are your grandchildren. How great, how wonderful. So something happens because you have an album. You've seen the kids in Brooklyn, they go around with the Rebbe cards. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but they have cards with pictures of Rosh Yeshivas, of Rebbes, and so on and so forth. And they trade them, you know. I'll give you one Volozhin, let's say, for 2 Chofetz Chaims or something like that. But the notion that they have that. When you can think of some people who did something beautiful, something heroic, who taught something nice, and you can connect yourself with those people, that's a wonderful thing to do too. So when it's a yahrzeit, you do that, but even it's not a yahrzeit, you know. I remember so-and-so doing something very beautiful, and it doesn't have to be someone who is dafka Jewish and holy, you know. I imagined if I were to see Guthrie singing one of those labor songs at one point, that would get me into Davvenen too, you know? So there is this part of the attunement beforehand. But more important than what you bring in that moment from outside is what you already remember from before. If I were to ask you, do you remember a highlight from last Rosh Hashanah? Right? And you tune into that highlight from last Rosh Hashanah. You are so much better prepared to daven than not. And that's why a Niggun is so important. You sing a melody or phrase. Sometimes only one part of the phrase is necessary. There's this beautiful song by Reb Yitzhak of Berdichev that begins, Ribono shel olam, Ribono shel olam, Ribono shel olam, Ribono shel olam. And then goes on, I want to sing you a Dudele, a you song, a thou song. You're here, at the east is you, at the west is you, north is you. But the first phrase, just the word Ribono shel olam, Reb David Zeller would sit with people and chant that sometimes for a long time. And the sense was to make yourself, not to bring God here, because God is here, but to make myself be and so you take that phrase, Ribono shel olam, 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 Ribono shel olam. And then to be able to say, and now I want to say part of Shacharit for you, you know, and you begin with that. What a difference it makes for you to get started. You also need to decide what highlights you need to touch this time in the prayer session. When you look at the 4 levels, which are, you begin with the body and the brachas of the body for the sight of the eyes and for the use of the body and so on and so forth. And someday you need more of that to be able to go, Baruch atah Hashem hanoten layayev koach, give me the koach, hanoten layayev koach, and to stay with that and say, that's what I'll say the rest of it too, but that's where I want to especially tank up, you know. Another place you might get to, I cried to you and you healed me when I was sick. And I really want to give you thanks for that, because it feels so much better not to be sick. So I thank you. And then that's the highlight that you want to, you know, you may say the rest of it, but that's a highlight there. Or you may come to the place before the Shema where you want to say, my heart has been so ripped apart from different things. Part of me wants to be here, part of me wants to be there. And I wish that my heart would come together. Unify my heart, put my heart together, so it shouldn't be so broken into different pieces. Then you know that that's what you want to highlight at that time. So it's good before the Davvenen to be really deliberate about that and to say, today I need to pay attention to this and I want to do, these are the highlights. Another thing that I shouldn't say, but I'll say anyway, decide what you're going to skip. Okay? If you don't decide beforehand what you're going to skip, you're going to be under the pressure to finish it all. And it says, Tov me'at bechavana, milaharbot shelo bechavana. Better a little bit with real intention, real kavanah, than a whole lot without kavanah. So it's important to decide, what am I going to skip? I have my places that I skip for most of the year, and only at special occasion, when that's really trenchant and important, do I do that. So you make your decisions what you're going to skip. If it were a computer program, you'd gray out that area, that you can't bring into what you want to do. When you allow for your timing, make sure that you leave time for the end. What do I mean to say? I've often mentioned that people say we don't get answers to our prayer, and the reason is they hang up the phone too soon. So there is that thing that's called she'erit ha'atzilut and yeridat ha'shefa, how you come down from the mountain and what you bring back with you, and how important it is that you should harvest what you got on the way up, on the way down, and not leave it to dry on the branch, Because that's when you get your action directives together for the day. Because that's, that was a moment of inspiration. It's almost, people think that prophecy is like something like you go to Kinko's and you sit in front of the prophecy machine and God is on the other end and he'll give it to you that way. I mean, that would be a silly way of saying it, yes? But why don't we recognize the fact that when we are preparing ourselves like this for the Davvenen, and something comes up for us, pay attention to this today, and so on and so forth, that this isn't prophecy, How else is it going to come to you if not that way? So to be open to receive and say, today I want to put this into the Davvenen, is a bit of prophecy for it. And one of the things that is very difficult to deal with is some things in psychology speak of reinforcement. When I do something well, and I do it again, and I reward myself, I reinforce that thing. It becomes stronger with me. So I can reinforce something with sensation. Sometimes with glasses, but sometimes even with focus, with seeing. I can do this to a certain extent with feeling, to focus into this area of feeling. When you are ready to come down from the Davvenen, and you remember the places where you got your prophecy, as it were, and you bring that down with you, then you get closer to a guided life. And that is why it's so, in sensation and in reason and in feeling, we can reinforce things. And intuition is very hard. What am I going to do to reinforce intuition? It's not, I can't give a reward to either, like a dog gets a bone, a cookie or something like this. What am I going to do to reinforce that? There's only one thing, to take it more seriously. The more I say to intuition, you're right on, you're right on, you're right on, the more stuff will come through intuition. And that, when it's tied to prayer, leads to a guided life. A tzedakah box should be next to you. You know, there are some people who say, I give so and so much tzedakah, and let me write out the check once and for all, you know, and give it away. So the Rambam, Maimonides, has a conversation going. Is it better that you should give a lump sum, or is it better that you should give little by little? And he says, better to give little by little, because the very action, you know, you increase the mitzvah, you are more present, you're there in it. So I have 5 pushkas in my Davvenen room, and at different occasions I put in sabani into each one of the pushkas. And there is a phrase in the Davvenen, in Vayevarech David, in that section, where it says, You atahu Adonai Elohim, you created heavens and the heavens of heavens and everything else and so on. And then goes on to say, and you invigorate them all. Ve'ata mechaye et kulam. And that's the time to drop into that pushka the money. And that's been a custom, Ve'ata mechaye et kulam. So when you go on Thursday morning to shul, you'll see that they'll all start going over around that time and put the money in, because it's important to have a tzedakah box there. It's like the put up or shut up thing. Now I want to tell you something else about that has to do with a story and with prayer partners. Before the Baal Shem Tov was ready to pass on, his disciples asked him all kinds of things. To whom should we go? Who will be our next leader? How will we know him? And so many of the things that he said at that time. He said, if you come and you ask him, what should you do? You should never have strange thoughts interrupting you in prayer. And if he gives you advice, he is not your Rebbe. He says everybody has to struggle with that, even I. Okay. Then he says, if you ask somebody, how do you get rid of pride? And they say, I have a prescription. He's not your Rebbe. Because with that you have to struggle to your dying moment. And in fact, the last words to the Baal Shem Tov said, Al tevieni regel gava. Don't lead me to the foot of pride. I mean, could you imagine who the Baal Shem Tov is? And he looks back at his life, and those last moments all plays back. He has an image of the big wake that he left behind him, and how many people are going to follow in his footsteps, and so on and so forth. Should he not take some pride at that moment? And so he is saying, please, Rabbi Shalom, this is really hard. Take that from me. Yeah? So, al tevieni regel gava. Then he said something else to them. I want you to sing the Niggun Reb Michel Zlotchever composed. And I promise you that wherever you're going to be, whatever you're going to do, if you need a prayer partner, I'll join you. And pray for what your intention is in prayer. So it's a good niggun for you to know. When the Rebbe, Reb Yosef Yitzhak, was about to pass on, he sent us a teaching that began with the words, I came to the garden, Bati legani achoti kala. And you'll talk to Chabadnikas, and they all know different versions of that Basi legani, as they will say, which is the one that Reb Yosef Yitzchak read. And every year afterwards, the Rebbe after him would take another paragraph and elucidate that. So I took the words, key words, from that teaching and added it to Reb Michel Zlotchever's melody. So I'm going to sing it now. And if you can learn it, that's a way to log on to a prayer partner, to the Baal Shem. I came to my garden from beyond time and space to meet my bride, my beloved, at our own very special meeting place, for not the angels of heaven above, but you, souls I love. Yai da 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 dum, ya da 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 di dum, hi da 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 dum, ya da 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 da, ah da da, ah da da, I die. My Lord, my love, my groom, with you let me commune. Please regard that in my heart for you I have made a room. Tiri-yama, ma, 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 ma. Tiri-yama, ma, 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 ma. I not I, I not I, I not da 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 da. Oh, save my soul from evil's rule. It makes one act just like a fool, so that the truth I'll realize and follow you, oh, eternally wise, to see then clear just how ideal it is for me, you near to feel. So please, my Lord, do hear my sigh, with Torah and mitzvahs, and with tshuva to you, my knot I tie. Tiri-yama, ma, 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 ma. Tiri-yama, ma, 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 ma. I not I not I, no, na, 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 na. My Lord, my love, my groom, please save me from doom. I shall heed your teaching indeed. Enjoy, please, never in gloom. It's a very deep Niggun. It always gets to me, you know, and when you put it together with those words. So for right now, I want to ask the Baal Shem Tov to pray, be my prayer partner, that the post-production stuff on this should go with such ease and so in clarity, and that the things that will lead to distribution will help a lot of people to daven. And let me say, Amen. Thank you, Baal Shem, for doing that. Yeah. We're about ready for the morning Davvenen instructions thing. So imagine you have left time to come down and to bring things down with you. And you put some money into the tzedakah box. And now you're taking the talis and the tefillin and putting them together. And at that point, it's so important to sing a happy ditty, you know? Most of the time we rush away. You have to fold the talis. You have to put the tefillin away. But if you do it mechanically because you want to get done fast, okay, but you could also sing something at that time. Yum da da dum bum bum bum, yum da da dum bum bum bum. You know? So to get into the feel that Ki besimcha teitzeu v'shalom tuvalun, that you go out with simcha from what you have just been doing. And then, when you sit down for breakfast, get the sense of how God is nourishing you, you know? That we forget it so easily, quickly, you know? I make my breakfast, I've done this, and now I sit down. To be able to say, oh, thank you, Rabbi Shalom. What a good breakfast. So Reb Zusha used to always say he would never ask people for food. He would say, oh, Rabbi Shalom, Zusha is hungry. And then when he would have the food, he would say, oh, thank you, God, for making sure that Zusha should have something to eat, you know. That attitude, to bring that to the breakfast, that translates itself into a lot of good feeling for the rest of the day, and gives a lot of simcha to being a good Jew. All right, anybody has any shilas or anything?
So I'm really appreciating what you've said about the morning practice and then how it goes into the day, and I'm thinking about that as a kind of springtime and a beginning, and that it's, for me, the most important thing to hear about. But I'm also wondering if you could say some things about either maybe the evening practice or something later before you go to sleep, or even during the day. I know this is a big question potentially, but maybe mostly, if anything, the evening.
Just give me a little bit time, because that's the thing for the next one.
Okay.
But I want to say something right now about Mincha. Mincha is in the middle of the day. They don't have phone booths anymore. Do you remember phone booths? Okay. When I would come into New York on the Grand Central, and it would be the afternoon time to daven Mincha, I'd go into a telephone booth and pick up the receiver and start davening, you know, because it wasn't something I could do in the middle of the, of the station, and or at least I could do, but I didn't, you know. But the telephone booth was very possible. There is a funny picture somebody took of a guy standing near the kotel with a cell phone. Did you ever see that picture? It was a wonderful, funny picture. It's almost like he wants to make sure that he gets through, you know, that there is a hot spot for Davvenen. So the afternoon thing is a short one. But what it does is it is very abrupt, because in the morning prayer you have the prayer of the body, the prayer of the heart, and the feeling, the prayer of the mind, and then the Amida, and then you come down. For Mincha, you have much less. Some people will do some of the body stuff that has to do with the sacrifices, but otherwise it's just one chapter of the Psalms, Ashrei, and right away the Amida. It's like taking off very fast at that point. So the answer to this is, yes, there is something about how would I say it? You're in the middle of doing some business, and somebody you love very much and whom you want to see is calling. And you're talking to a customer, and you can't do that. At the same time, you don't want to talk to your beloved with the language of the customer. So a nice switch happens. Listen, honey, I really want to talk with you. Haven't got the time right now in the middle of business, but I'll call you, you know? So what happens is, right, you see what I'm saying? There's a feeling of that. And so Mincha is that kind of a thing, to be able to say, I'm in the middle of the day, this crazy day, I'm in the telephone booth, but I just want to say a quick, you know, and do it in this way, or even send up arrow prayers. So that would be the response to this. We'll talk about the times. Yes?
You said arrow prayer?
Arrow prayer. Yes. That's a wonderful word. It means that Jacob was saying that I captured the land with my sword and my bow. So the Targum translates it not that he was using a real sword and a real bow, but this was a metaphor bitzluti uvevauti, with my prayer and with my entreaty. In other words, the weapon of a Jew is his prayer, okay? That's how he did it. So when you say quickly, you send up just a momentary awareness and say, dear God, I need your help. Or dear God, I know you're there. Or dear God, in the middle of things that I'm busy, but I love you, you know? These are called arrow prayers because they don't take very long and they go directly to the heart of God. So that's how it's called, yeah? Any? All right, then we will say Reb Chananya ben Akasha Amar Rotza Kodesh Baruch Hu Lezak Szól Lefikach Aleim Torah Mitzvah Shenemar Adonai Chofetz Leman Sitko Yagdil Torah V'Yadir.